You think you know your son. You think 30 years of sacrifice means you will never die alone. I used to think that. I thought Sunday dinners and paid college loans bought me loyalty. Then he met her. And I realized that to my son, I was not a mother. I was a bank account waiting to be drained. He did not know he was stealing a few odd dollars, while I held the keys to millions, and he just violated the only term that mattered. My name is Evelyn Hayes, and at 62 years old, I am invisible. A widow, a former paralegal, a ghost haunting the corners of Denver. This morning, I was just a woman trying to buy a small coffee. The air in the shop was thick with the smell of burnt espresso and sugary syrups. A young man with bright green hair and a nose ring smiled at me, all practiced kindness, until he swiped my debit card. His smile faltered. He swiped it again. The small, digital screen flashed a cruel, red, declined. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he mumbled, his eyes dropping to the counter. He could not even look at me. The pity was the worst part. It coated me, thick and suffocating. That look from a boy barely 20, reserved for old women who smell of mothballs and cannot afford a $3 luxury. "It must be a mistake," I said, my voice thin. I stepped out of line, the shame hot on my face. The people behind me sighed, impatient. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers trembling on the cracked screen. The banking app took forever to load, the little wheel spinning, mocking me. Then, the numbers appeared. Balance $12.50. A hollow, cold feeling settled in my stomach. It was not shock. It was recognition. This was the third time this month my account had been drained to nothing. I knew exactly who it was. I did not have to wonder. My son, Mark, and his wife, Bianca. The two people who were supposed to be my family. The ones who were supposed to be my care. As if summoned by the thought. My phone buzzed in my hand. A bright, cheerful notification from Instagram. Bianca had posted a new photo. I tapped it, and my stomach churned. There she was, pouting into the camera from the leather seat of a car I did not recognize. She was holding up a new handbag. It was a Balenciaga, aggressively studded, a hideous thing that I knew cost thousands. The caption, glowing beneath the image, was a single, defiant tag, YOLO. You only live once. Bile rose in my throat. The contrast was a physical assault. I was standing in a coffee shop, unable to buy a simple drink, feeling like a beggar, while my daughter-in-law flaunted $1,000 purchases paid for with my money, my $12.50 against her designer bag. I put the phone away and walked out of the shop, the bell on the door tinkling a cheerful goodbye. The Denver air was thin and sharp, and it bit at my cheeks. I pulled my thin coat tighter. I did not walk toward the bus stop. I did not head back to Aurora, to the small, two-bedroom apartment that everyone knew. The apartment that Mark and Bianca visited, their eyes scanning my quaint old furniture, wondering what they could sell next. The apartment that was a stage, a set I had built to test him. Instead, I walked downtown. My legs ached by the time I reached the First National Bank. The building was a monument of cold marble and polished brass, a place that smelled of old money and floor wax. The people who walked these silent, carpeted halls did not get their cards declined. I did not go to the tellers. I walked past them, down a quiet hall, to the vault. The security guard nodded at me. He knew me here. Here. I was not the invisible old woman from the coffee shop. I used a different key. Not the simple house key on my main ring, but a heavy, ornate, silver key I kept in a hidden pocket of my purse. It slid into the lock of a private safe deposit box. An attendant, quiet and professional, brought the long, metal box to a private viewing room. He closed the door behind me, leaving me in the soundproofed silence. I lifted the lid. There were no bundles of cash, no heirloom diamonds, just paper. A single, thick, leather-bound portfolio. I ran my fingers over the embossed title, The Hayes Inheritance Trust. I opened it. The paper was heavy, crisp. My late husband, Richard, had set this up before his heart gave out. He was a quiet man, a man of old money who despised flash. And he had seen the softness in Mark long before I was willing to. He worried Mark would be taken, or worse, that he would rot from the inside out if he never had to work for anything. The principal, stated clearly on the first page, was $20 million, all of it intended for Mark. But Richard was not a fool. My name was listed, not as a beneficiary, but as the sole executor. I was the gatekeeper. And there, under Section 4, subsection B, was the clause that mattered, the character clause. The funds would only be released after Mark's 35th birthday, and only if I, the executor, deemed that he had demonstrated integrity, empathy, and family responsibility. Mark knew nothing about it. He would not turn 35 for another 6 months. He thought he was draining the last dregs of my meagre savings, stealing grocery money from his aging mother. He had no idea he was violating the terms of an inheritance that could have changed his life. He had no idea that I was not the victim. I was the judge. I sat in that sterile, silent viewing room for a long time, the heavy portfolio open on my lap. The smell of the old paper and leather binding was the only thing that felt real. It smelled like my husband, Richard. He was a man who belonged to a different era. He wore the same tweed jacket for 20 years, the leather patches on the elbows worn smooth. He was old money, the kind that found overt displays of wealth to be deeply, almost morally, offensive. He would have loathed Bianca on sight. He died 15 years ago, a massive coronary that took him from me before he had finished his morning paper. He was only 58, but he had known. Even when Mark was just a teenager, Richard saw the flaw in him. He called it a softness of character. He worried Mark would be a ship without an anchor, easily pulled by the tide, easily captured by pirates. He worried our son would be used, or worse, that he would become useless, corrupted by money he never earned. So, he created the Hayes Inheritance Trust. I was there. I was a young paralegal at Viridian Legal Solutions then, specializing in trusts and estates. I remember the late nights, sitting in our home study, helping Richard draft the language. He wanted it to be ironclad. He wanted it to be a test. The trust was his final act of fatherhood. $20 million, locked away, managed by his old firm. Mark would not be eligible to touch a single cent until his 35th birthday. But the date was just a gate. I was the key. The release of the funds was entirely contingent on Section 4. Subsection B, the character clause, the inheritance. It read, "Shall only be disbursed upon the beneficiary, Mark Hayes, having demonstrated to the sole satisfaction of the executor." That was me, a life of proven integrity, genuine empathy, and unwavering family responsibility. If he failed, if I could not, in good conscience, sign my name to that statement, I had the absolute, unrestricted authority to redirect the entire principal. Every last dollar was to be given to the charities Richard and I had chosen together, decades ago. After Richard died, I made my choice. The life insurance payout was generous, enough to live very comfortably, but I hid it. I let Mark believe it was just enough to get by. I bought the small, sensible apartment in Aurora. I kept my old car. I lived modestly, pretending to count coupons, all to create the one thing Richard could not give Mark the need to build a life. I sacrificed my own comfort, living like a pensioner, to give my son a chance to forge the character his father feared he lacked. I was testing him. I was waiting for him to become the man his father had wanted. He failed every step of the way. I was not blind. I was just a hopeful mother. I remembered the calls from his college dorm. The small gambling debts he swore were just a misunderstanding. A few $100 here, 1,000 there. I paid them. I told myself it was just boys being foolish. I covered for the jobs he lost, the apartments he was evicted from, the string of bad investments. I always believed he would grow up. I kept waiting for the real Mark, the one I knew was buried under all that softness, to finally stand up. He never did. And the theft. That was the twist. The knife I had allowed to be pressed against my own back. I knew. I have known for years, long before Bianca. He started small. He must have found my debit card PIN, watched me type it at the grocery store. $50 from my account. Then 70. He always timed it just before my Social Security check hit. So he knew I would be low. I allowed it. I let him steal from me. I balanced my checkbook, saw the discrepancies, and said nothing. I accepted it as a sick, twisted price to keep him in my life. A mother's tax, I thought. If he still needed me for money. At least he still needed me. I let him chip away at my meager savings, hoping the shame would eventually stop him, hoping he would see the error of his ways before it was too late. Before his 35th birthday arrived, and I would be forced to make a choice I did not want to make. I closed the portfolio. The time for hoping was over. The petty thefts changed the day Mark brought home the hunter. Her name was Bianca. He brought her to Sunday dinner, the one ritual I had stubbornly maintained, hoping it was an anchor for him. They were an hour late, not 20 minutes, which is rude, but a full 60 minutes, which is a statement. A statement that their time was valuable, and mine was not. The door opened, and she swept in, not as a guest, but as an invader. She was wearing a dress that was tight, black, and cost more than my monthly grocery budget. It was laughably inappropriate for my small apartment in Aurora, a place furnished with the comfortable, worn pieces Richard and I had collected over 30 years. She did not smell of perfume. She smelled of money, a sharp, metallic scent. "So this is it," she said, her eyes doing a quick, dismissive scan of my living room. She did not mean it as a compliment. Her gaze lingered on my walnut bookshelf, my comfortable floral sofa, her lip curling just slightly. I saw her instantly categorize everything as old. Not antique, which has value, but old, which is just in the way. Mark, my son, hovered behind her, a nervous shadow. "Bianca, this is my mum. Mum. Bianca." She did not offer a hand. She gave me a brittle smile that did not reach her eyes. Her eyes were like a shark's cold, assessing, and constantly moving. Throughout dinner, I watched her hands, She had long, perfect, blood-red nails. She used them to touch Mark constantly. It was not affection. It was not a loving caress. It was a tap on his forearm to stop him from speaking, a proprietary grip on his thigh under the table, a constant, physical reminder of who was in charge. She was branding him, marking her territory, and he just let her. He seemed to preen under the control. She did most of the talking. A high, bright monologue about her job in acquisitions, a job that seemed to involve many lunches and very little actual work. Then, she turned those cold eyes on me. "Mark said your husband, Richard, was from a good family," she said, picking at the roast chicken I had made. "Was there anything left an estate? Or was it all just this?" She gestured vaguely at the walls of my home. I felt the air chill. Mark looked down at his plate, embarrassed. But he said nothing to defend me. I gave her my polite, paralegal smile, the one I used to reserve for opposing counsel who thought they were smarter than they were. "Richard was a very sensible man," I said, my voice even. "He made sure I would be comfortable. I have my pension. And of course, this little apartment. I have everything I need." The change was immediate. The light in Bianca's eyes switched off. The brittle smile vanished. She had looked at me, seen a modest, 62-year-old widow in a simple apartment, and calculated my worth down to the penny. I was a dead end, a dry well. I was of no further use to her. She barely spoke for the rest of the meal. After that dinner, everything accelerated. Mark's calls, which had already become infrequent, slowed to a trickle. And when he did call, it was different. Bianca and I were wondering. He would start. Or, "Evelyn, can you check your mail?" "Evelyn?" "Not Mom." Not since Bianca. As if the word mother implied a debt he was no longer willing to pay. But I will never forget the moment I knew, the precise second the hunter revealed her teeth. We were still at that first dinner. I was clearing the plates, my hands shaking slightly from her interrogation. I dropped a fork. It clattered onto the linoleum floor. "Oh, bother," I murmured. Both Mark and Bianca leaned down to help. But I was faster. As I bent over, my gaze swept under the table toward my small desk in the corner of the dining area. I froze. Bianca was not looking for the fork. She was half bent, her back to me. Her phone was in her hand. She was holding it low, angled up at the desk. On the desk was a stack of my mail, bills, and a few old, folded documents from my insurance company, the ones detailing the modest policy Richard had left me. She was not helping. She was not even pretending. She was crouched on my dining room floor, secretly taking photographs of my private financial papers. I picked up the fork. When I rose, she was already standing, her smile back in place, bright and false. "Got it," I said, holding up the fork. "Silly us," she laughed, tapping Mark on the chest. "Let me help you with those." "Evelyn." I looked at my son. He was smiling, oblivious. He had seen nothing. He had seen the woman he loved, the woman who had just inspected his mother's home for assets, and he felt nothing. That was the night I stopped being a mother. I became an executor. After that dinner, my life began to unravel in small, calculated increments. It was what I started to call the Forgetful Mother campaign. It began with my possessions. Small things at first. A silver picture frame would be on the wrong table. My keys would be in the refrigerator. I knew I had not put them there. But when I mentioned it to Mark, he would sigh, that long, suffering sound. Mum, you are getting forgetful. It is okay. It happens. Then, Richard's sapphire ring vanished. It was not a large ring, but it was the colour of his eyes. I kept it in a velvet box in my top dresser drawer. One day, the box was there, but the ring was gone. I tore my apartment apart. I felt a cold panic, a grief so sharp it was like losing him all over again. I called Mark, weeping. It will turn up. Mum, he said, his voice impatient. You probably just put it somewhere safe and forgot. 2 weeks later, Bianca posted a photo from a brunch. Her hand was on a mimosa glass. On her right ring finger was a sapphire. It was not identical. The setting was slightly different, but the colour was his. My blood ran cold. Next came the finances. Mom, you bounced a check for the utility bill, Mark said one afternoon, stopping by unannounced. It is totally understandable. Things get confusing. Why do you not let me help? I can set up your online banking, link it to my account, just so I can, keep an eye on things for you. Make sure everything gets paid. Bianca was standing behind him, smiling that thin, supportive smile. I saw the hunter's gleam in her eye. This was the trap. This was the moment they had been waiting for. Oh, Mark, I said, forcing a tremor into my voice. Would you? I get so worried about those things. I do not trust the computers. I let him do it. I played the part of the frail, incompetent old woman perfectly. But I was not a fool. I was a paralegal who had drafted trust documents more complex than their tiny minds could imagine. I did not give him access to my real savings, the modest account I actually lived on. I gave him access to the bait, a separate checking account I had opened years ago, into which I deposited a few $1,000s, my emergency fund. The blood was in the water. It took less than 24 hours. First, a Netflix subscription. I do not watch Netflix. Then, Ubers. I take the bus. Then a string of Amazon purchases, small at first, then larger. A new pair of headphones. A luxury dog bed. They did not even own a dog. They were not even trying to hide it. They were testing the limits. And when I said nothing, they grew bolder. Within a month, they had drained almost $2,000. Then, winter came to Denver, sharp and brutal, and I got sick. It started as a cough and settled deep in my chest. It became a raging bronchitis, a fever that left me weak and dizzy. I could not breathe. The air in my apartment felt thick as mud. For 2 days, I tried to manage it myself, but the fever spiked. I was coughing so hard I saw stars. I was scared. I was alone. And I was genuinely scared. I dialed Mark. My hand was shaking so badly it took 3 tries. He finally picked up. Mom, I am in the middle of something, he said, his voice distant, annoyed. Mark. I gasped, and a fit of coughing seized me. It was a horrible, rattling sound. Mark, I cannot breathe. I think I need to go to the doctor. I am scared. There was a muffled sound as he covered the phone. But I heard her. I heard Bianca's voice, clear as a bell, sharp with irritation. She is just being dramatic for attention. Mark. Tell her to take an Advil. A pause. Then my son's voice came back, stripped of all warmth. Mum, I am really busy. Bianca and I have reservations. I will send some food over from GoPuff. You probably just need to hydrate. The line clicked. He hung up. He had hung up on his mother, who could not breathe, because he had reservations. I dropped the phone. The reality of it hit me harder than the fever. They would let me die. They were not just stealing from me. They were not just gaslighting me. They were willing to let me die on my apartment floor over a missed utility bill. I crawled to the bathroom, chasing the cold of the tile. I lay there for hours. I lost track. The fever dreams came, mixing Richard's face with Bianca's shark eyes. I lay there for what must have been 12 hours, shivering, alone, and fully, terrifyingly awake to the truth. I survived. The fever broke around dawn. I dragged myself to my bed and slept for a full day. The final piece of their plan clicked into place 3 days later. I was finally feeling human, drinking hot tea, when my doctor's office called. Mrs. Hayes, the receptionist said, "This is just a courtesy call to confirm your appointment for this Friday at the Colorado Cognitive Health Clinic." I almost dropped the mug. "I am sorry I did not make that appointment." "Oh," the receptionist said, confused. "It was, It says here it was booked by a Mark Hayes for a preliminary dementia evaluation. He said you had been having significant memory loss and confusion." The tea turned to ice in my stomach. It was not just about stealing my money. It was not just neglect. They were building a medical file. They were methodically, legally, trying to prove I was incompetent. They were not just waiting for me to die. They were planning to take my life from me while I was still breathing, lying on that bathroom floor. I did not just get cold. I got hard. The fever burned away the weeping. Sentimental mother I had been. The grief. The hope. The endless capacity for forgiveness, it all turned to ash. And from that ash, the paralegal I used to be stood up. My sadness did not just turn into anger, it turned into a cold, precise, and icy rage. The kind that does not scream, the kind that takes notes. The old Evelyn was a victim. The new Evelyn was an executor, and I was preparing my case. My first act was to use the skills Richard had always admired. I began to document everything, every single thing. I bought a small digital voice recorder and kept it in my pocket. I logged every phone call, transcribing their impatient sighs and casual dismissals. I printed every bank statement from the Bait account. I created a file. But I needed more. I needed what they were like when they thought I was not looking. I went online and ordered a nanny cam, a tiny, insignificant black cube, hidden inside a functional USB phone charger. When it arrived, I plugged it into the wall outlet in my living room, the one with a clear view of the kitchen counter and my front door. It sat among my old, dusty knickknacks, completely invisible. I let a week pass. Then, I made the call. I pitched my voice high, shaky, and confused. "Mark," I said, injecting a false panic. "Mark, I am so embarrassed. I think I've lost my credit card. Again." A heavy, put-upon sigh on the other end. "Mom, you just did this last month. It is probably in your purse." I know. I looked, but I have no food in the house. I was going to go to the store, but now I do not have any money for groceries. Could you possibly bring me just a little cash, just to get me through the week?" "Fine," he snapped, his irritation clear. "We will swing by. We have dinner plans." They arrived an hour later. Bianca swept in first, tapping her foot, her eyes on her phone. Mark followed, looking like a man being forced to clean a drain. I had already set the trap. On the kitchen counter, I had placed a simple white envelope. Inside, I had put $200 in cash. I had made a point to go to my real bank, the one downtown, to withdraw it. "Oh, thank you. Thank you." I fluttered, playing the helpless bird. "I just need to run to the bathroom to find my medicine before I forget. Please, make yourselves comfortable." I pointed to the counter. "I cashed my check yesterday. That is my grocery money for the whole week. I will just be a minute." I walked slowly to the bathroom, closed the door, and locked it. I did not turn on the water. I did not open the medicine cabinet. I stood in the small, dark room, my hand on the doorknob, and I just listened. I heard nothing. No talking. Just silence. After 2 minutes, I flushed the toilet for effect, unlocked the door, and walked back out. Mark was leaning against the sofa. Bianca was standing right where I left her, still looking at her phone. "Ready?" she asked Mark, not looking at me. "Yeah," he said. He pulled a crumpled $20 bill from his pocket and tossed it on the counter, far away from the envelope. "Here you go. Mum, try not to lose it." "Thank you, dear," I said. "Have fun at dinner." They were out the door in less than 30 seconds. I waited until I heard their car pull away. I walked to the counter. I looked at the envelope. It was thinner. I looked inside. $100 was gone. I did not feel angry. I did not feel hurt. I felt satisfied. I waited until dark. Then I took the small SD card from the camera, slid it into my old laptop, and clicked play. The footage was clear. The audio was perfect. The camera watched them as I stood in the bathroom. It watched Bianca glance at the bathroom door, then at Mark. He was looking at his shoes. She gave a small, impatient shrug. She reached over, her red nails sharp as talons, and slipped the money from the envelope. She did not even count it. She just folded the bills and slid them deep into the pocket of her designer jeans. And Mark. He watched her. He saw the entire thing. He did not stop her. He did not look shocked. He just closed his eyes for a second, sighed, and said, "Hurry up, she's coming back out." This was not the moment I knew. This was just the final page of my brief. I clicked on another file, and another. This was not the first time I had filmed them. I had 6 months of this. 6 months of video evidence. There was footage of Bianca, waiting for me while I was in the bedroom, methodically opening the drawers of my desk. Footage of her picking up my mail, reading it, and laughing. There was footage of Mark, alone, mocking the way I limped when my arthritis was bad, putting on a high, quavering voice. "Oh, Mark, I am so old. I am so forgetful." They were not just thieves. They were ghouls, dancing on a grave I was not even in yet. I saved the new file. I labeled it Exhibit A. I closed the laptop. The hunter had her proof. Now, all I had to do was set the final trap. With the final piece of evidence saved, the performance could begin. I waited 2 days, letting the silence stretch, letting them wonder if I had died from my lost credit card. Then, on a Tuesday evening, I dialed Mark's number. I took a deep breath, picturing myself on that cold bathroom floor, and summoned the tremor. "Mark," I whispered, as if speaking was painful. "Mum, what is it now?" His voice was already sandpaper. "Oh, Mark." I let my voice crack, A single, practiced tear rolled down my cheek, a prop for my own benefit. I have been doing so much thinking since I got sick, and you were right. You were right about me. Silence on his end. He was listening. I am so forgetful. Mark, I am scared. I keep losing things. I am all alone in this apartment. And what if I fall? What if what happened last winter happens again? And I cannot get to the phone. Mom, what are you trying to say? He asked, a new note in his voice. Not concern, greed. It was sharp and eager. I think I need to move, I said, letting the words tumble out in a rush. I think I need to sell the apartment, sell all this old stuff, and move into one of those assisted living places, where there are nurses. I heard a muffled sound, a sharp intake of breath. It was Bianca. She was on the line, listening in. Of course she was. Mom, Mark said, his voice suddenly smooth as oil, dripping with a false concern that made my stomach clench. Mum, that is a big step. Are you sure? I am, I said, my voice small. I need to get my affairs in order. I need to make sure everything is simplified. For you, I want to make sure you are taken care of. Mark, that is all I want. Richard would have wanted you to have everything, to be looked after. The bait was in the water. The sharks circled. Oh, Mom. Bianca's voice burst onto the line, so sweet it was toxic. We did not know you were feeling this way. Of course we support you. Mark, honey, we should take her to dinner. Tonight. Absolutely, Mark said. Mom, we are taking you out. Somewhere nice. To talk this through properly. We will pick you up in an hour. For the first time in years, they were not late. They arrived in a new, gleaming black SUV. Bianca rushed to my side, taking my arm in a grip that felt like a vice. They took me to Del Frisco's, a palace of dark wood, leather booths, and men in suits. The smell of seared meat and old wine hung in the air. This was their world, not mine. I let myself look small and overwhelmed, my old wool coat draped over my shoulders like a shroud. The moment we sat down, Bianca seized my hand across the white tablecloth. Her red nails dug into my skin, but her smile was blinding. Evelyn, Mom, she gushed, her voice loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. We are so proud of you. It takes so much courage to admit when you are ready to accept help. We just want you to know we are here for you, 100%. Mark nodded, his face a mask of solemn concern, already looking like a man grieving his mother's mind. The waiter arrived. Bianca ordered the largest porterhouse steak on the menu and a bottle of wine that cost $400. A celebration, she announced. Throughout the meal, she laid it on thick. She talked about wonderful facilities she had researched, places with lovely rooms. And then, as the main course was cleared, she made her move. Now, Mom, about all this paperwork, selling the apartment, your accounts, it can be so overwhelming. I know a fantastic lawyer. He is very modern, very fast. He helped a friend of mine's family with this exact situation. I can have him call you tomorrow. He can come to your apartment, and we can just get it all sorted out, sign everything over. She smiled, a kind, reassuring shark's smile. She wanted her man, her lawyer, to simplify my assets straight into their bank account. I let myself look confused. I blinked, as if the wine and the conversation were too much for me. "Oh, no," I said, shaking my head gently. "No, that is so sweet of you, dear. But I could not." Bianca's smile tightened. "Why not? He is very good." It is all so confusing," I said, looking down at my lap. "I did not know who to call, so I did the only thing I could think of." I looked up, my expression one of pure, frail innocence. "I called Richard's old lawyer from Viridian. You know, Mr. Kincaid." The name dropped onto the table like a block of ice. Mark just looked confused. "Who—" But Bianca went rigid, her wine glass, halfway to her lips, stopped. Her face, a moment ago so full of warmth, became a frozen, pale mask. Her eyes, those cold shark eyes, narrowed at me. She knew that name. Kincaid. Croft and Lowell. That was not the name of a simple probate lawyer who handled apartment sales. That was the name of old money. That was the name of power. "You called Kincaid," she said, her voice no longer sweet. It was a low, dangerous hiss. "Yes," I said, smiling my sweet, forgetful mother smile. "He was so kind. He remembered Richard, of course. He said he could see us right away. We have an appointment, next Tuesday, at his office, 10 in the morning, to, you know, simplify everything." The offices of Kincaid, Croft and Lowell occupied the entire 50th floor of the glass tower downtown. The elevator ride was so fast and silent, it made my ears pop. We stepped out onto a carpet so thick it was like walking on moss. The air smelled of polished mahogany and old paper. There was no music. The only sound was the distant, respectful tapping of keyboards. Mark was sweating. He kept pulling at the collar of his shirt and trying to straighten his tie, which he had clearly tied in a hurry. He looked like a child brought to the principal's office. Bianca, by contrast, looked like she owned the building. She wore a severe, razor-sharp, cream-coloured pantsuit. Her hair was pulled back in a tight, gleaming knot. She looked powerful, predatory, and completely at home. She had her hunter's face on, ready for the kill. I clutched my old purse, my knuckles white. I had deliberately worn my faded grey wool cardigan, the one with the small pillings on the cuffs. I let my shoulders hunch. I was the very picture of a confused, frail, elderly woman, about to be led to the slaughter. A silent receptionist guided us to the main boardroom. It was a cavern of glass and dark wood, overlooking the entire city of Denver. A long, gleaming mahogany table reflected the sky like a dark lake. A silver coffee service with delicate porcelain cups sat on a sideboard. We sat. Mark fidgeted. Bianca placed her designer briefcase on the table and clicked it open, pulling out a slim leather folder and a pen. She was ready to take notes, ready to take over. The door opened, and Arthur Kincaid walked in. He was exactly as I remembered him, just older. He was a tall, severe man in his 70s, with a shock of white hair and eyes like chips of ice. He wore a three-piece suit that was probably older than Mark and worth more than my car. He did not smile. He did not introduce himself. He simply walked to the head of the table, his presence sucking all the air from the room. He gave Mark and Bianca a brief, dismissive glance. His eyes met mine, and for a fraction of a second, I saw a flicker of the old, kind lawyer who had helped me and Richard. Then it was gone. He was all business. Bianca, sensing a rival for dominance, did not wait for him to speak. She leaned forward, her voice bright and professional. "Mr. Kincaid, thank you for seeing us on such short notice. We are here today to discuss the transfer of Evelyn's power of attorney. We have some significant concerns about her cognitive state and her ability to manage her own." Mr. Kincaid held up one hand, a simple, almost lazy gesture. Bianca stopped, her mouth still half open. "No," he said. His voice was not loud, but it was absolute. It was the sound of a vault door closing. "We are not here for that." The silence in the room was suffocating. Mark looked like he might be sick. Bianca's professional smile faltered, replaced by a mask of cold indignation. Mr. Kincaid reached into his own briefcase and pulled out a single, massive, leather-bound document. He placed it on the mahogany table. The sound was not a tap. It was a thud. Final. Heavy. "We are here," Mr. Kincaid said, his cold eyes fixed on Bianca, "to review the explicit terms and executor's findings for the Hayes Inheritance Trust." Bianca stared at him. I could see the wheels turning in her sharp, greedy mind. She was recalculating. A trust. Something more than the apartment. Her eyes lit up with a new, even more intense avarice. But it was Mark who spoke. He looked from Kincaid to Bianca, his face a perfect picture of genuine, idiotic confusion. What trust? I watched Bianca's face. The blood drained from it. Her expression did not just freeze, it shattered. She slowly, very slowly, turned her head to look at my son. It was a look of pure, unadulterated shock. Not at the news, but at him. In that single instant, she finally understood. Her partner, her tool, the man she had been controlling, was a complete and utter fool. He had no idea. The entire, elaborate, cruel campaign, the gaslighting, the theft, the attempt on my life, it was all based on the scraps from my decoy account. She had been hunting a mouse, while a lion sat in the same room. And my son, her great prize, knew absolutely nothing about the real money. The silence that followed Mark's question was absolute. It was heavy and cold, like the air in a tomb. I watched Bianca's face. The shock faded, replaced by a slow-dawning, reptilian contempt. She was not just looking at Mark. She was re-evaluating her entire life, her entire investment, and realizing she had backed a fool. The man she had hitched her wagon to was not a secret prince. He was a pauper who did not even know his own name. Mr. Kincaid, indifferent to our family psychodrama, slowly reached into his suit jacket and produced a pair of thin, gold-rimmed reading glasses. He settled them on his nose, the gesture deliberate and unhurried. He opened the leather-bound trust. The sound of the thick, heavy paper turning was the only noise in the room. "The Hayes Inheritance Trust," Mr. Kincaid began, his voice a dry monotone, as if he were reading a weather report. "Established by Richard T. Hayes, July 14th, 1998. Funded upon his death, October 7th, 2010. The principal of this trust, as of this morning." He paused, his finger tracing a line on the page. "Is valued at $20,452,611. Mark made a sound, a high-pitched, strangled gasp. All the blood drained from his face, and he gripped the edge of the mahogany table, his knuckles white. He looked like he was going to faint. Bianca's eyes, on the other hand, lit up. A dark, feverish, ecstatic fire ignited behind her pupils. 20 million. This was more than she had ever dreamed. This was not just Balenciaga bags. This was a new life. She had been right about Richard's family after all. She sat up straighter, her entire body vibrating with avarice. Mr. Kincaid continued, his voice unchanged. The structure is simple. The beneficiary is the donor's only son, Mark Richard Hayes, the sole executor, granted full, singular, and uncontestable authority over the disbursement of the funds, is the donor's wife, Mrs. Evelyn Hayes. He looked up, just for a moment, over the rim of his glasses. He looked at Bianca. She was already calculating, her mind spinning. The forgetful mother was the gatekeeper. Her gaze shifted to me, the old woman in the pilled cardigan. I was no longer a dead end. I was a door she just needed to kick down. "This brings us," Mr. Kincaid said, turning another page, "to the core terms of disbursement. Section 4, subsection B, the character clause." He began to read. His voice was a flat, merciless scalpel. "Disbursement of the principal shall be authorized only, and if the beneficiary, Mark Hayes, upon reaching the age of 35, has demonstrated, to the sole and absolute satisfaction of the executor, a life of proven integrity, genuine empathy, and unwavering family responsibility." He stopped reading and looked up. The room was still. Mark was pale and sweating. But Bianca laughed. It was not a happy sound. It was a sharp, ugly bark that shattered the quiet. "So what?" she snapped, her professional mask gone, her true, raw voice emerging. "He's her son. She's his mother. It is a technicality. Just verify it, Evelyn, so we can all get on with our lives." She looked at me, her eyes commanding. It was not a request. It was an order. She was already spending the money. I had been silent the entire time. I had sat there, a small, grey bird, watching the predators. Now, I turned my head. I did not look at my son. I looked directly into the eyes of the hunter. I let her see, for the first time, the ice in my own veins. I let her see the woman who had helped draft the document. "Unfortunately, Bianca," I said, my voice perfectly clear, perfectly calm, and resonating with an authority she had never heard. "That is precisely why we are here." I turned my gaze to Mr. Kincaid. "Mr. Kincaid," I said, "I believe my son, Mark Hayes, has fundamentally and repeatedly violated the character clause." Mark's head snapped up. "Mom!" "What?" Bianca's eyes widened, a flash of pure fury. "You cannot be serious." Mr. Kincaid held up his hand again, silencing them both. He looked at me, his expression unchanged, but with a new gravity. "Before we proceed with your official declaration, Mrs. Hayes," he said, his voice dropping slightly, "and before we review the evidence you have provided, did you want me to call the police? As we discussed." "Police?" Mark's voice was a high-pitched, terrified shriek. He looked wildly between me and Mr. Kincaid, his face ashen. Mom, what are you doing? What is this?" I did not look at him. I had not looked at him since Mr. Kincaid read the clause. My son was a noise in the room, nothing more. I kept my eyes locked on Mr. Kincaid. I reached into my old, worn handbag, the one Bianca had probably assessed and dismissed as worthless junk. My fingers bypassed my wallet and my tissues, closing around the small, cold rectangle of metal. I placed the portable hard drive on the gleaming surface of the table. It sat between us. A small, dark bomb. "Mr. Kincaid," I said, and my voice was steady for the first time in years. It was the voice of Evelyn Hayes, paralegal. "Please display Exhibit A." Mr. Kincaid gave one single, sharp nod. He took the drive and plugged it into a discreet port built into the table. He pressed a button on a control panel, and a massive screen descended silently from the ceiling, covering a painting of the Rocky Mountains. The screen flickered to life, and the boardroom was illuminated. "Exhibit A," Mr. Kincaid announced, his voice a flat, legal monotone. "Bank statements from the Bait account, established by Mrs. Hayes. We see a total of 84 unauthorized transactions over a period of 9 months. A spreadsheet filled the screen. Red circles highlighted every single charge. Netflix," Mr. Kincaid read. "Uber, Amazon, GoPuff, totaling $4,712. We were just helping her manage it," Bianca snapped. But there was a tremor in her voice. "That's petty cash. She probably forgot she told us to." Mr. Kincaid clicked to the next slide. "Exhibit B, a report from a private investigator, dated 3 months ago." A new document appeared, and photographs. A picture of Richard's sapphire ring, a picture of a pawn shop on Colfax, and then a grainy, high-angle security photo of Bianca, her face clear as day, standing at the counter, her red nails visible as she slid the ring toward the clerk. "The ring was sold for $900, Mr. Kincaid said. "Bianca," Mark whispered, his voice trembling. You said you lost it. You said it slipped off your finger?" Bianca did not answer. She was staring at the screen, her face a mask of white-hot fury. "Exhibit C," Mr. Kincaid said, his voice relentless. "Video." The screen changed. It was my living room, my small, cluttered living room, seen from the angle of the wall charger. The audio was crystal clear. My voice, frail and high. "Just need to run to the bathroom." The video showed me walking out of frame. It showed Bianca, standing by the counter, looking at the bathroom door. She looked at Mark. He was looking at his shoes. She gave a small, impatient shrug. And then, her hand darted out, quick as a snake, pulling the cash from the white envelope. And the video showed Mark. He was standing by the sofa. He watched her do it. He saw everything. He said nothing. He just closed his eyes and let out a long, weary sigh. "Hurry up," he muttered. "She's coming back out." "No," Mark whispered at the table. "No, that's not. And finally," Mr. Kincaid said, "Exhibit D." The screen went black. The room was plunged into a dark, heavy silence. And then my voice, amplified, filled the space. It was the audio recording from that night. It was the sound of me dying. My coughs, wet and rattling, echoed in the high-tech boardroom. My gasping voice. "Mark, I cannot breathe. I think I need to go to the doctor. I am scared." A pause. The sound of a hand muffling the phone. And then, Bianca's voice, sharp, clear, and dripping with contempt. "She is just being dramatic for attention. Mark, tell her to take an Advil." "No," Bianca screamed. She shot to her feet so fast that her heavy mahogany chair crashed backward onto the floor. "You old bitch." she shrieked, her face twisting into a mask of pure, primal hatred. The pantsuit was gone. The hunter was cornered, and she was all teeth. You set us up? You were spying on us. You were faking it. You set us up. Mark just broke. He made a sound I had not heard since he was a toddler, a deep, choking, terrified wail. He collapsed forward, his head hitting the table with a dull thud. His shoulders heaved as he sobbed, snot and tears streaming onto the polished wood. "Mom," he cried, his voice muffled by the table. "Mom, I am sorry, I am so sorry. It was her. It was all her. Mama, she made me. She told me you were crazy. She put the ideas in my head. I am sorry. I am sorry." I looked at him, at my son, a 34-year-old man, weeping and blubbering, trying to throw the woman he loved to the wolves to save himself. All my life, that sound, his crying, had been a physical summons, a pull in my chest to run, to soothe, to fix. This time, I felt nothing, just cold, clear, empty space. I let him sob for a full 10 seconds. Then I spoke. "No, Mark," I said. My voice was quiet, but it sliced through his wailing instantly. He looked up, his face a swollen, pathetic ruin. It was not her fault. I nodded at Bianca, who was standing, panting, her eyes wild with rage. She is a predator. That is her nature. She hunts. I turned my eyes back to my son. The fault is yours. It was always yours. Because you were weak enough to let her. You are weak. I turned away from his broken expression. I looked at the impassive face of my husband's lawyer. "Mr. Kincaid," I said, "I have made my decision." Mr. Kincaid pushed the final signature page across the table. He did not offer me a pen. One was already there. A heavy, black fountain pen that felt cold in my hand. I uncapped it. I signed my name, Evelyn Hayes. The signature was not shaky. It was the firmest I had written in 30 years. I slid the document back. Mr. Kincaid picked up the page. He inspected the signature, giving it a brief, formal nod. He folded his glasses and placed them in his breast pocket. He looked at Mark and Bianca, not as grieving family, but as loose ends to be tied. "Then it is finalized," he announced to the room, his voice echoing slightly in the tense quiet. "Pursuant to Section 4, Subsection C of the Hayes Inheritance Trust, due to the beneficiary's failure to satisfy the character clause, the executor, Mrs. Evelyn Hayes, has exercised her authority." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "The full principal and all accrued interest of the Hayes Inheritance Trust, totaling $20,452,611, will be immediately diverted, in full." Bianca's eyes were still bright. "Diverted," she said, the word sharp. "Diverted where to her?" Mr. Kincaid ignored her, continuing to read from the document. 50% to the Colorado Children's Hospital Foundation, and 50% to the Metro Denver Homeless Shelter Network. Mark's head came up. His sobbing stopped, cut off as if by a switch. He looked from Kincaid to me, his face a swollen, grotesque mask of tears and total, blank confusion. "What?" he whispered. The homeless. No. Mom, you cannot. You would not. That is my money?" His voice cracked on the last word, the pure, unadulterated entitlement of a boy who had been given everything and earned nothing. I finally stood up. My old knees ached from sitting. but I stood tall. I looked down at my son for the last time. "It never was," I said, before Mark could even process my words. Bianca moved. The fury on her face vanished, replaced by a contempt so pure, so absolute. It was almost stunning. She looked at Mark, not with hatred, but with the cold, dead assessment of a bad investment. He was a useless failure. "You," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "You absolute, useless failure." She ripped the diamond engagement ring from her finger. Not my sapphire, but the one Mark had bought her. She threw it. The ring hit Mark squarely in the chest, a pathetic little tink, and bounced onto the table, skittering across the polished mahogany. She snatched her Balenciaga bag from the floor. She grabbed her leather briefcase. She did not look at me. She did not look at Kincaid. She walked straight out of the boardroom, her heels clicking a sharp, final rhythm on the marble floor. She did not run. She simply left, and she did not look back. Mark stared at the empty doorway, stunned. "Bianca, Bianca!" He pushed himself up, his chair scraping violently. He stumbled, intending to run after her. The door opened before he reached it, but it was not Bianca. Two uniformed police officers stepped into the room. They were large men, and their presence seemed to suck all the remaining air from the space. Mark froze. What is this? Mr. Kincaid had clearly timed this. The taller officer stepped forward, his eyes on my son. "Mark Hayes." "Yes, Mr. Hayes," the officer said, his voice polite but firm. "You are under arrest for financial elder abuse." "What?" Mark's voice was a squeak. He turned to me, his eyes wide with a new, fresh panic. "No, Mum. Tell them this is a mistake, Mum. Mama, tell them." He lunged for me, but the second officer caught his arm. I did not flinch. I did not move. I watched, impassive, as they turned him around and cuffed his hands behind his back. I watched as he dissolved, not in remorse, but in the terrified, squealing panic of a cornered animal. They read him his rights, his sobs drowning out the words. I bent down and picked up my old purse. I walked to the door. I had to pass him. He was standing there, cuffed, weeping. "Mama, please," he begged. I walked past my son, out of the dark, cold room, and did not say a word. That was 6 months ago. I sold the apartment in Aurora. I sold the old furniture. I bought a small, bright condominium near Washington Park. I have a balcony where I grow tomatoes, and I volunteer 3 days a week. I work in the kitchen at the Metro Denver shelter, the one Richard had always cared about, the one that now bears his name on a small brass plaque in the lobby. I chop vegetables. I stir the vats of soup. The work is hard, and it makes my back ache. But it is honest. It was a Tuesday night. The line was long, stretching out the door. The smell of beef stew and fresh bread filled the warm, humid hall. "Next," I called out, my voice tired. A man shuffled forward. He was thin, gaunt. His face was covered in a patchy, filthy beard, and his clothes were in rags. He kept his head down, holding out a plastic bowl with a hand that trembled. I looked at his hand. Then I looked at his face. The softness Richard had worried about was gone. It had been carved away by the street, leaving only a hollow-eyed, desperate shell. He looked up. Our eyes met. It was Mark. I learned later he had made bail, but Bianca, who was already living with a new man, had refused to pay it. He stared at me, his chapped lips parted. "Mom," he whispered. I looked at my son, the man who had let me lie on the floor, the man who had stolen from me, the man eating in a homeless shelter funded by the $20 million he had thrown away. I picked up the heavy ladle. I dipped it deep into the stew. I filled his bowl to the brim, thick with beef and potatoes. "Enjoy your meal," I said, my voice quiet, even. I turned to the person waiting behind him. Next. That night, in my new, quiet home, I sat by the open window. I opened my phone, a force of habit. Instagram. She was the first post. Bianca. She was on a yacht, her hair blowing in the wind. She was kissing a man older, silver-haired, a real estate developer I recognized from the news. Her hand was on his chest. On her finger was a diamond the size of a small bird's egg. She was holding up a new purse, a Birkin. I looked at the photo for a long time. The hunter had found new prey. I turned the phone off. The screen went black. I sat in the silence, listening to the crickets, and for the first time in my life, I felt at peace. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where in the world you are listening from. So please comment below and let us all connect and share our thoughts. If this story moved you, please consider subscribing to Grandma's Family Diary. Give this video a like and support us by hitting that hype button so more people can hear these stories.